Time to preview the NFL season for 2024 on the Our Lads Football Network and the Our Lads Football YouTube channel. Marc Lawrence, of course, joining me. Marc will be with me actually in about an hour to preview week one in college football. So we normally air our shows at 4 o'clock Eastern every Thursday, but we had to adjust our schedule today for this special NFL preview with Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. Ryan, nice to have you join us again for, I believe this is what, year 3 or year 4?
Something like that. How are you guys? Good to see you.
I'm doing great, Ryan. I feel like I have the New York Post in front of me, but audio version rather than reading it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get right to it. Let's make our predictions. We're going to start in the AFC. Let's go division by division, and we're going to start in the AFC East. And just by taking a look, I already, of course, know your pick, so I know who you're going to pick to win the division. And it looks like we are actually all going to pick different teams, so I think that's pretty cool. Ryan, let's start with you because you are actually going to take the New York Jets.
Hey, man, I've seen them 7 or 8 times. Call it exposure bias. The team's loaded. I mean, they have so many good players at the top end of the roster. They're a deep roster. Yeah, I mean, if the quarterback isn't healthy, they're going to stink. But, I mean, how many teams can you say that? The Bengals didn't make the playoffs without Joe Burrow. So Aaron Rodgers has a 30-year-old arm, not a 41-year-old arm. He's moving around well. I have no doubt he can still play. It's just a question of whether he stays healthy, but that applies to 30 other quarterbacks. So I think the Jets are loaded, and I think they have the right mindset about the season. They're no longer basking in awe of Aaron Rodgers. They're ready to win.
And Marc, you are going to disagree with that pick, and you are going to stick with the defending champs?
I'm going to stick with the defending champs, at least not so much within the division, but number one seed out of the AFC. I don't think they're going to get any further than the first game, but nonetheless, I'm going to default to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, we're talking about the AFC East.
Oh, the East itself? Well, the AFC East put me down for Buffalo.
Yep.
As my number one seed in there, and number two seed Miami. And I would love to ride along with Ryan. My only main concern was the Aaron Rodgers that I recall before the injury. He was really regressing production-wise, and I just don't know if he can overcome that and get back to the old Aaron Rodgers. I know he's rested. He's got new wheels and so forth and whatnot. And the Jets are loaded, as Ryan says, but I'm going to default to Buffalo and then Miami.
I think that's interesting because I got Buffalo taking a decent sized step back, guys. I mean, I think I put them in the playoffs, but I mean, you take off Stephon Diggs, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. I mean, that's a couple of their starting offensive linemen. This is what happens when you pay a quarterback $55 million or whatever Josh Allen's making. You start to lose, you no longer have the rookie contract cap space. You start to lose some flexibility. He's a great player, Josh Allen. He's going to have to be better than he's ever been to make up for some deficiencies.
And that's what I'm expecting, Ryan. I'm expecting a career year from Josh Allen to be fully focused. I think Stephon Diggs was a cancer in the locker room that needed to get removed, and I think it was. That's just me personally. And I just cannot get past visualizing Aaron Rodgers being the Aaron Rodgers of old. I could be completely wrong on that, but he's going to have to prove it to me first.
Okay, so by the way, just so you know, Marc, you're going to need to revise your overall rankings because remember, the top 4 teams have to be division winners.
Okay.
East, North, South, and West. So I'll ask you to give me your top 7 in both the AFC and the NFC when we're done here by each division. My pick, by the way, is going to be the Miami Dolphins. I think that at this point, to me, I just think you have to respect both Miami and Buffalo if you're, say, a Jet fan like myself. I agree with everything you said, Ryan, obviously, but I just can't go there just because I just can't. I'm a trend guy, and I have to be true to my trends. And the Jets are whatever 0 for 13, and until they prove it, I just can't do it. So I'm actually only picking one team from the AFC East to make the playoffs, and that's the Miami Dolphins. Because I agree with you guys about the Buffalo Bills possibly regressing a little bit, or at least you, Ryan. Yeah, and it's all about the Jets actually putting a great season together and staying healthy for the first time in years. And if they can do it, then they're going to be a dangerous team come playoff time.
I thought about having 3 teams from the AFC East in the playoffs, and you only have 1. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and Mark, you have 2, Buffalo and Miami, right?
Buffalo and Miami, correct? Yes.
All right, so there you go.
So neither of you has the Jets in the playoffs. I have them winning the AFC East, and let's spoiler going a lot farther.
Yes, you do.
I can see that coming.
All right, let's go to the North, and let's start with Mark with the North. This is where you have your hometown team there, the Cleveland Browns. But it looks like you've got a couple of teams from the North making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Cincinnati wins the AFC North. I think the Cleveland Browns get in as the wild card out of the AFC North. And I have the Baltimore Ravens as the disappointing team in the division this year, to the point where I don't even feel they'll make the playoffs this season.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually agree with Mark.
No playoffs for the Ravens?
No. I think this is such a tough division, and I just think it's one of those things we saw a couple of years ago. Baltimore having problems, Lamar Jackson getting hurt. Then last year, Joe Burrow gets hurt, Deshaun Watson gets. So it's just you don't know what's going to happen year to year. Everybody knows Baltimore is as talented as any team in this division, maybe just about, maybe more. Who knows? But player here less, coach here less. I get it, more or less, I should say. But the fact is, I just think it's one of those things that I think it's time for Cleveland to take over dominance because I believe in Deshaun Watson. And just like you said about Aaron Rodgers, I got to believe Deshaun Watson is going to stay healthy. And if he does, I think he's going to have a fantastic year. And I think the Browns are going to be that much better for it. And I think Joe Burrow is going to be obviously going to inject life to the Bengals. So I have both Cincinnati and Cleveland making the playoffs. And I actually also have Pittsburgh making the playoffs. So I have the only
Ravens
team
in last place?
The only team not making the playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens.
I'm not going that far with the Ravens in last place. I'll let Greg declare that, okay?
Well, you have him in third, so it's not that far off.
Yeah, guys, my head's hurting. What are we doing? The Ravens are loaded. I mean, my concern is the offensive line. I mean,
exactly.
I will say, I will admit I'm concerned about the Ravens' offensive line, but the defense is as good as ever. I don't even know how you begin to try to defend Lamar Jackson's speed and Derrick Henry's bulldozer. Like, I don't even know how you begin to defend. They're a fun team to watch because they play differently than everybody else in the NFL today. So, I thought about putting them in the Super Bowl. I was not picking the Chiefs. Obviously, everybody knows the Chiefs can win the Super Bowl. They're the favorite to win the Super Bowl. I was looking for something a little different. I was back and forth. I spent a good time putting the Ravens in the Super Bowl. I ended up not doing it because I think the road is so brutal. I mean, that this is a historic division. I think it was the first time ever in NFL history all 4 teams were above 500 last year. I don't think that'll happen again, but I do see it as a division where, it's a survival of the fittest or dog eat dog or whatever. So I actually put the Ravens all the way down as my 4 seed, my lowest division winner, just because I think they're going to all beat themselves up and maybe 10-7 wins that division. But I have all 3 in the playoffs. I have the Bengals, I have the Ravens winning the division, the Bengals, and the Browns in the playoffs. I think you could have, I don't know, maybe 3 10-7 teams with a tiebreaker.
Ryan, let me share this with you. I came across this. I thought it was really interesting, and you mentioned the same thing that I'm on, and it's the Baltimore Ravens offensive line. And I think there's trouble in the making here, and if it is, it won't bode well, obviously, for Lamar Jackson. But the trouble that I see in the making is they have a new offensive line coach, George Warhop, and his 18 years as an offensive coordinator in the National Football League, only 1 team has ever had a winning record.
That is a great stat.
And that was the Tampa Bay Bucks in 2016 when they went 9-7, only one game over. Okay?
Why would you hire that guy? Oh my God!
I'm just telling you what it is that I came across.
That is a crazy stat.
I give you straight up. They're 86, and his record is 127 and 153 overall. But nonetheless, only 1 winning year in 18 years with this offensive line coach. They have offensive line problems, and I think that's where the implosion begins with Baltimore.
Wow, that is a great stat. I'm not going to change my mind, but I will say I talked to enough NFL people who would tell you that the fourth most important person on a NFL coaching staff is the offensive line coach. It goes uh, head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, offensive line coach.
And I agree with that pattern exactly.
Yeah, that is actually the thing I am the most worried about with Cleveland, because they're losing the best offensive line coach in the league. And so that is the one thing I'm a little bit concerned with. And I did talk to Fred Greetham, who covers the Browns, and he was talking about how so far, the offensive line, they haven't gelled together yet. They haven't practiced together yet. There's some injury concerns. So I'm a little bit concerned there, as much as I like Cleveland this year. So we'll get into them for me a little bit later on as well. Let's move on to the South. And it looks like we have two teams winning the division, and meaning Ryan, you have Houston. Mark and I are taking Jacksonville. So I do have Houston making the playoffs.
You guys and I aren't seeing anything the same today, huh?
Yeah.
Is sky blue over there, or is red?
But I do have Houston making the playoffs. Mark only has Jacksonville making it. But yeah, I for me, I just think Jacksonville is as long as Lawrence is healthy, I can't see that not being the case. I think they're a much better team. I think Brian Thomas is going to have an awesome year. I think their offense is going to look really good this year with Peterson in control, and I think the defense is better. So I think it's going to be interesting seeing the Jacksonville team from 2 years ago and better the Houston team from last year. Those two teams collide, and that's why I have them both making the playoffs.
Mark?
Let me say this. The reason I agree with Greg, I like Jacksonville. I like the improvement. I think this is a breakout year for Trevor Lawrence this season here. He's matured enough. There's no more excuses. And what I'm doing here is really an anti-Houston play. And the anti-Houston play comes from a theory that we've talked before in the past. I call it a triple Lindy dump. And what happens with Houston is they won more games last year than they did their previous 3 years combined. And teams go into serious regression after having done just that. Don't quote me on these numbers because I just worked it up in my database this morning. But overall, those teams, whenever they improve more than three times they did in one season, they did the previous three combined, they were like 48 and 106 overall the next following football season here. That's serious regression. And I think what now suddenly Houston becomes the hunted rather than the hunter, and I think they pay the price this year.
I like doing this podcast because Mark always has these crazy number stats that make me think about it differently, because obviously I rely mostly on what I see and what I hear from people, and that stat is crazy. Yes. I'm going to just say this. I do know how many, 0 of those other teams had CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud, to me, is the MVP of the league this year. Like, there, people who vote for this are going to be tired of giving it to Patrick Mahomes, tired of giving it to Lamar Jackson. They're going to look for the next guy. It's CJ Stroud. To me, that team went all in, like you should do as soon as you have a quarterback you believe in on a rookie contract. Stephon Diggs, Jonathan, what's the pass rusher from the Vikings? Greenwood, Greenard. Something
Grenard,
like that.
Grenard,
yeah, very good pass rusher. Trade for Joe Mixon. I think they spent something like $144 million in the first 2 weeks of free agency. So I think the Texans are that team that takes that next step. And the Jaguars, it's like, look, Trevor Lawrence, we're all talking about him because he was a generational prospect and the number one quarterback, and he kind of gets a pass because the other 4 quarterbacks in that draft first round were all total flops, so he kind of gets a pass. But like, he has done nothing really, Trevor Lawrence, and we obsess over the Eagles' late season collapse. And is Sirianni any good? And Jalen Hurts, is he any good? And like, do they still have it, the Eagles? No one talks about the fact that the Jaguars were like 9-3. They were like positioned for like the first seed in the AFC playoffs. Totally let their season fall apart with Trevor Lawrence back from injury, and lost what is obviously a winnable division, one of the weaker divisions in the NFL. I'm just not in on Jacksonville at all.
All right. And in the West, Ryan and Mark are going back to the Chiefs. Mark has the Chargers making the playoffs. I have the Chargers winning the division like I predicted last year.
What? This is wild. I love this show. This is wild.
And because I'm not picking the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, I can't have them in the playoffs. Because
no playoffs for the Chiefs.
Because if they make the playoffs, how do you stop them in the playoffs? So how
are you stopping them in the regular season that they're losing like 9 games?
What happened last year? They weren't they were lucky that teams like the Chargers and Denver and the Raiders all stunk and they had an easy ride and they weren't playing great going in.
They won by 12 games.
Don't forget, they were an underdog. People thought that Baltimore was going to beat them in the championship game. This is not the same Chief team. And look, they were better in the second half because they got the receiver situation straightened out with Rashee Rice. I think the Rashee Rice situation is going to be a distraction. The dude shouldn't even be playing football. All right, let's just talk about that for just a second. The fact that the league is not suspended this turkey is a disgrace. The fact that they're going to wait till the end of the season and then suspend him for 3 or 4 games next year, when the fact is he almost killed 7 people. So there has to be some sort of a distraction. Also, you're in your 3rd straight year of winning a Super Bowl or coming off a Super Bowl. It's just sooner or later, things don't go your way. And they got so lucky last year that all of those quarterbacks in AFC got hurt. So as long as all those quarterbacks stay healthy this year, I believe the Chiefs are going to regress a little. They'll be a 9-7 type team, that type of team, but they'll just miss out on the playoffs. And that's because if they get there, it's going to be hard for me to pick against them. So that's my reasoning.
Tua Tagovailoa
of the year. Go ahead. Ryan.
Hold on, Mark. I got to interject. Tua Tagovailoa didn't get hurt. They beat him in the playoffs. Josh Allen didn't get hurt. They beat him in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson didn't get hurt. They beat him in the playoffs. Like, they just know how to win. Teams that know how to win, they're not getting lucky. They know how to do this. They have the head coach who knows how to do this. Patrick Mahomes put his ego aside and let the defense be the unit that carried them to the championship. The Chiefs, people think like they weren't the aired out Tyreek Hill show last year. They won because of Chris Jones and that secondary, and because Mahomes almost didn't turn the ball over and then made all the plays in the fourth quarter because Kelsey's unguardable. I mean, they added a Xavier Worthy, who I think is going to be awesome as a rookie, fastest guy in the NFL. And they added Hollywood Brown, who I think might be injured right now, but he'll be healthy when the games matter. So even if they lose Rashee Rice, or Rashee Rice is a distraction, I mean, you don't think that team, I mean, Andy Reid's had and this is a criticism of Andy Reid, he's had 1 billion guys arrested in his career. I mean,
including family, yes.
I don't even know what to like. I guess this is he knows how to handle it. You wish he would clean it up, but he knows when distractions or whatever the Rashee Rice is are part of your team. I mean, like you said, the Rashee Rice is more about the human element of that story than it is what kind of distraction of football. Who cares about football in that situation? But I just think anything that isn't the Chiefs winning that division, I don't even think that division is very good. I mean, Greg, you're probably picking the Chargers because of Jim Harbaugh. I don't even know that I can name 10 starters on the Chargers. They cut their whole team.
Well, look, we were all picking them the last several years, and now I'm not going to pick them. But now I'm not going to pick them when they finally fix their head coaching situation. Come on, that would be silly for me.
But they lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. Yeah, they have I would love to go back in time and pick them when they had Harbaugh coaching those guys. But now they have Harbaugh coaching coaching guys I don't even know. Come back to me in 3 years. I'll pick the Chargers then.
Well, just keep in mind too, Herbert, Lawrence, Burrow, Watson. I have them all making the playoffs. They were all injured last year. I didn't have Aaron Rodgers, but you did. He was injured last year. That's what I mean, too, is that all of those teams are going to be better. I still think the Chiefs are going to be good, but again, I'm not saying if everybody's healthy and everything's great that they're not going to make the playoffs. I just think sooner or later stuff happens, and you can't just run to the playoffs every year, win Super Bowls, and then just keep doing it, because sometimes you just have a bad season.
So I have a big story coming after the post that I would appreciate if our listeners here read. It'll be out sometime this week. on that exact topic. So I called people from the 8 teams that have gone back to back and had 3-peat chances. I talked to Ronnie Lott, Daryl Johnston, Jack Ham, Larry Zonka, from teams that have gone back to back about how hard it is to go back to back to back. And yes, I would agree. They all thought, yes, it's very, it's hard to do. Injuries mount, distractions. Guys get a little full of themselves, forget how hard it is, et cetera, et cetera. That said, we forget it has been very close to being done. Like it's not like teams fall apart.
No.
Once the 49ers were a walk-off field goal away from beating the Giants in the 90 championship game. The 49ers got to the NFC championship game. The Ravens the Dolphins went to 3 straight Super Bowls, might have been 4, except for what's called the sea of hands game. Like it can be done.
Sure. Yeah, and I look at it back as also because the Chiefs have actually won 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. Yeah. So it's
Ryan, if you believe in biorhythms, some people do. A lot to other people, they're like astrology. But as far as players playing with, as far as biorhythms are concerned, a neat little stat about the Kansas City Chiefs this year. They're going to play on 6 different days of the week of the season. That's the first team to ever do that in the National Football
6
League
days
in
of the
100
week.
Years.
That's
now,
crazy.
Does that mess them up? What day of the week is it? Is this Tuesday? Is it Friday? Is it Saturday? We don't know.
Who knows? I buy it.
All I know is we haven't seen this three-peat forever, and I think maybe just a little bit of biorhythms might fit into the mix. That's all.
Okay, now let's talk about the playoffs. So the seeding. Mark, did you redo your seedings?
For which
AFC?
For the
if not,
AFC,
we can save it for later.
Yeah, we'll save it for later.
Okay, so let's go to the NFC. Let's go to the NFC East, and we'll start here. And I think this is also going to be quite interesting because I'm taking Washington, and I'm taking Washington because, as I said before on another show, I'm sorry, I don't like this division at all. I think this division is going to be a major disappointment. I know you guys are on Philly, but I'm not buying this. Everything's kumbaya with Nick Sirianni. I just don't. I think there's a major issue there. And anytime you have an issue with your head coach coming off a bad year, I don't remember it ever getting better. So maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe they'll take advantage of a weak division. But if they don't get their head straight, Dallas, they've done nothing this offseason. And if you're looking at a team, and I've said this all offseason, that I think Daniels could be the next CJ Stroud. And so I might as well put my money where my mouth is. Wow. And I think he will be the next CJ Stroud. And I think that the Washington Commanders will represent the Houston Texans from last year to the Commanders this year. So that'll be my pick, my only pick in the NFC East.
I tip my cap. That is different. I was looking for something different in this. That is different. The Chiefs don't make the playoffs, and Washington wins the NFC East. I tip my cap to you. I don't have a lot to say here. I picked pretty much the status quo in the NFC East. It's the division I know the best. I picked the Eagles 1, the Cowboys 2, the Commanders 3, the Giants 4. The Eagles are loaded in talent. I agree with you. The head coach is a concern. But if I'm ignoring that Robert Saleh is a concern for the Jets, I'm just going to ignore it for the Eagles. At least Sirianni's coached in big games before. The Saquon Barkley addition, I love. Secondary is a little bit of a concern, but we've seen the kind of impact rookie corners like Quinyon Mitchell can make. Cooper DeJean can make. So I think there is. I'm not worried about the offensive line. I still think it's one of the 5 best in the NFL, even without Kelsey. So I think I don't love the NFC to begin with, but I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC right now as we look at the 49ers without Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk.
And Mark, you agree with him completely?
Completely?
First 2 teams.
Yes, I do. But let me roll back to your point on Washington here, Greg. And I think it's noteworthy. There's going to be improvement from this team, not just from a Dan Quinn standpoint, But again, if you rely on history and what's happened in the past, Washington was the worst team in the National Football League in turnover margin last year. Teams that are in that particular role, they bounce back tremendously the next year. The law of averages says, hey, come back to the norm. You're not going to live down there forever. The last 8 years, that teams that were worst in the National Football League in turnovers, only one of them did not improve their record from the previous football season. And with Dan Quinn there and all this return to the norm in place here for Washington, I like that. My biggest concern to Washington, Greg, is I believe there were 8 quarterbacks in the NFL last year that started every game for their team last year. Washington was one of those guys, and they don't have him. That was Sam Howell. Does breaking in Jaden Daniels affect your
luck? Quarterback health luck?
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. If that happens, forget it. So, all right. Let's go to the North, and we all have. Hey, we're finally agreeing on something. We all have both the pack. Actually, we're not agreeing on something. What am I saying? Because Mark has Chicago. So
wait, Ryan, none of us have the Lions?
No, we both have the Lions.
I don't have the Lions.
No.
I don't have the Lions winning the division.
No, Mark's the only one that basically took Chicago and did not take Detroit and Green Bay. So I have Detroit winning. You have Green Bay winning, Ryan. We both have Detroit in the playoffs and Green Bay in the playoffs. Mark has Detroit winning, but the only difference is instead of putting Green Bay in, Mark has put Chicago in. So we'll start with Mark.
Well, I don't want to be a guy that's jumping on a Caleb Williams bandwagon because it's the last thing I would do. I just think he's overrated. But to me, more important, Matt Eberflus has really, really gotten this team turned around here. We saw a lot of it in the second half of the football season last year when they could have raised the white flag and they didn't. They closed the season out as good as any team in the National Football League that made the playoffs last year. And I think there's room for vast improvement for Chicago this year. And I also think Green Bay regresses off of Jordan Love's first football season that he had last year. But Detroit, I think, wins the division by default. I'm a little bit concerned about them because that stat we talked about with the Houston Texans winning more games last year than the previous 3 years combined, it very nearly applies to Detroit because they won more games last year than the last 3 years, but one of them was a push. So I'm looking for Detroit to regress here as well because of for the amount of wins that they surprise everybody with, and 2, the whole public is all over Detroit here. And I'm not a big Dan Campbell fan. I think he's the reason that we're not talking about Detroit being a Super Bowl losing team. They didn't make it that far, I think, because of the coaching goofahs. But out of that division, by default, I have Detroit winning it and Chicago finishing second.
Ryan, because I have Detroit winning it and Green Bay coming in second. So same as last year, but you flipping it with Green Bay and Detroit.
I am. This might be a little bit of an overreaction. I just saw the Lions for 2 days in joint practices with the Giants, and the Giants, I don't know, held their own, or they were the severely less talented team, but they stood up to Detroit physically. So I'm wondering if the bully mentality Detroit's tried to impose last 2 years is starting to wear off. I think the Lions are really good. I wonder if after it's rarely a straight line ascension. You usually have some sort of bumpy road. They should have been in the Super Bowl last year. I just wonder if they take a slight step back. I'm not knocking them out of the playoffs. I just think the Packers are a team on the rise. The Lions could have a bump in the road here. I think the Lions are really good. I just think the Packers on the rise and the Lions are due for some sort of adversity here. It's not just going to be so smooth where you go from being awful to knocking on the door to, hey, we're in the Super Bowl. I think there's probably some adversity they face here.
Okay, let's go to the South. And in the South, bottom line is I've given this a lot of deep thought since I picked Tampa Bay to surprise everybody and win the division last year. And I understand what everybody's thinking about Atlanta because you guys both have Atlanta. But I'm sticking with Tampa Bay. I think what I really thought about myself was as much as I think it's going to be tight, I mean, how stupid would I feel if I did not take Tampa Bay and they won it again? So I've got to stick with them. I think that they have done a good job in keeping a lot of their key players in-house. And I actually think they're going to be better on defense. They had some banged up guys on defense last year. So if they're a healthier defensive team, I think that they're going to make them a little bit more well-rounded. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay to win the division. And you guys have Atlanta. So we'll start with you, Ryan. You have the Falcons, who seem to be everybody's darling pick this year. Last year, it was New Orleans. Remember that? Everybody was on New Orleans, and it was the New Orleans, Derek Carr, and that didn't turn out well. But a lot of people are on Atlanta this year with Kirk Cousins coming to town.
Yeah, I'm on Atlanta. I don't think it's a very strong division. I think they did all the things that you do when you try to buy yourself a division. They signed Kirk Cousins. They signed Justin Simmons. They traded for Matt Judon. This is a team with a very short-term focus. They're an all-in this year kind of team, and if it wrecks the salary cap or whatever, so be it. Guys, you have the GM trying to save his job. So, no, I think this is all about this year for the Falcons, and it's a winnable division, so I think you could probably win it at 10-7 kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm in on the Falcons. I'm out on the rest of the division. I can't believe the Bucs were as good as they were last year. The Saints, I think that they're stuck in the mud. If anything, they're going to have to go in reverse, and the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL.
I can almost echo Ryan's sentiments there. I'm with Atlanta as well. I do like the Kirk Cousins pickup here. I think he finally gives him a credible quarterback, maybe even going back as far as Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan really wasn't at the peak of his game when he found his way to Atlanta. I think Kirk Cousins, if healthy, can vault this football team into the playoffs and maybe even make a little bit of noise. You look at their schedule, it's the softest in the National Football League in terms of the opponents that they play this year. You look at their projected season win totals, you add them all up, and Atlanta takes on the softest projected win total opponent schedule in the National Football League this year. And when you're residing in a division...
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes, it is. And when you're residing in a division that's as weak as the AFC South or NFC South is, anybody that wins that division, nobody's going to pull their hair out and say, what? I mean, Carolina Panthers probably so, but I see Atlanta on the improve here, and I see Tampa Bay going backwards. Tampa's lived in this exclusive club. I think it's the last. I think there's 6 teams that have won in the playoffs 3 years in a row, and Tampa Bay is one of them. And I just don't feel they belong in the club, and I think they get replaced this year by the Atlanta Falcons.
And then here is the only division where we have the same 2 teams making the playoffs. The only one out of the 8. We both have San Francisco. We all have San Francisco and the Rams making the playoffs here. Ryan has San Francisco winning the division. Mark and I have the Rams winning the division, but we all have those 2 teams making it. We'll start with you, Ryan. San Francisco, you don't have them going back to the Super Bowl. I see that, but you do have them winning the division.
I would not be somebody who called Trent Williams bluff, right? Didn't he sit out most or whole of entire season with the Commanders because of a contract issue? Like, I just would not do that. And he is as valuable a left tackle as there is in the NFL. So I don't know what Brock Purdy's going to look like without his blind side being a brick wall. So I think they're really good. Again, I think they're a super talented team. I love Shanahan as a regular season coach. Don't love him in the playoffs. So, yes, I would do that. I think the Niners are a 12-5 caliber team. They'll be right there competing for the Super Bowl. But it scares me when they have these 2 major holdouts. You want to talk about distractions. I think these are distractions when your teammates are being asked every single day about these 2 guys.
And by the way, Mark, this could definitely be a team, once again, that loses the Super Bowl. And these distractions could be a tip-off for us that maybe they don't even make the playoffs.
Well, I'm with Ryan here. I don't see them winning the division. I got the Rams winning the division, and I see a step backwards here for San Francisco. If you're Kyle Shanahan and you're not sleeping well at nights these days, it's probably because you've gone up against Andy Reid 4 times in your career and you never beat the guy. So that's what he would have to realistically think about doing this football season. I don't think it happens. San Francisco is going to be a good football team. They may, obviously, they're the favorite to win the division, but I don't think they do so. I have the Rams to win this division. I think they're going to be a vastly improved football team, the Rams.
I do. I mean, I think the Rams. I put them. If I could have picked them higher than whatever 5 or 6 seed, if it wasn't like, oh, you have to do the 4 division winners, I would. I think they're one of the 4 best teams in the NFC. They're in the wrong division because the 49ers are so good. But I think the Rams are a vastly improved team too.
Okay, now we're going to run through the rest real fast. As far as the seeding, let's go back to the AFC, and this is how Ryan has it. Kansas City, Houston, the Jets, and Baltimore winning their divisions 1 through 4. Cincinnati, Buffalo, and Cleveland will be the playoff teams, not winning the division. And then the NFC, Ryan has Philadelphia, San Francisco, Green Bay, and Atlanta winning the division, with Detroit, the Rams, and Dallas as the playoff teams, rounding out the 7. And we'll start with you, Ryan, there, because I know you got to run the championship in the AFC. You have, I'll let you go ahead with it. You give us your championship picks in the AFC and the NFC.
So I was texting a source. You ran through my AFC playoff rankings, right?
Yes.
So in the AFC, I have the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the New York Jets in the AFC Championship game, and JETS to the Super Bowl.
Sounds good to me.
Hook, line, and sinker, Greg. Hook, line, and sinker.
I'm in. I think they're loaded. I don't know if the coach can coach, but I know they don't have any of the Sirianni problems. The team loves him, so I just don't know how he'll handle, clock management and all that kind of stuff that matters in big games, because he's never coached in a big game.
Okay. And then in the AFC for Mark, we've got Kansas City, Buffalo, Miami, Cincinnati, followed by Cleveland, Jacksonville, and the Chargers. And in the NFC, actually, that's right. You have to give me the new seedings. I forgot about that, Mark. Did you get them? New seedings?
The seeding is exactly how you gave them for the 7 teams in the playoffs.
You need a new one. You can't have Miami third. Remember, the 4 teams have got to win their division.
What's wrong with Buffalo winning the division?
You have Miami third.
Miami can't be higher than 5th.
Well, all right. Well, then let's drop Miami to 5th, okay?
Okay, we'll move Miami to 5th, and we're going to move up who? We're moving up Cincinnati to 3rd.
Cincinnati to 3rd. Cleveland to 4th.
And Cleveland can't be 4th. It's got to be Jacksonville. So Jacksonville will be 4th. Okay, and then you'll have Cleveland 4th, or Cleveland 5th, or Miami 5th.
I'm going to put Cleveland 4th.
5th.
5th. Okay.
And Miami 6th. Okay. Right. And the Chargers in 7th. All right. And in the NFC, you got Philly, the Rams, Detroit, San Francisco, with Dallas, Atlanta, and Chicago. So, Mark, your pick to win the championship, which, by the way, as Mark says this, keep in mind, it's the exact pick I have.
You talking AFC or NFC?
AFC.
AFC. You have the Cleveland Browns over the Cincinnati Bengals in the championship?
I do.
Oh, my goodness.
What is this, 1987?
He bought it. I've been touting the Browns all off season here, guys, and it's a football team that's getting really little respect, at least in the Vegas sportsbooks' eyes. I believe they're 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're in a division here. You tell me the difference between Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland. Baltimore and Cincinnati are like 10-1 each, and Cleveland's 40-1. Are you kidding?
It makes no
me?
sense.
No, the answer is the quarterback. The answer is the quarterback. Deshaun Watson hasn't been good in 4 years.
Well, he hasn't been healthy.
No, he hasn't been good.
No, he hasn't been healthy.
Well, healthy's the reason, okay? He hasn't been any good, okay? And he has not played him at all in the preseason this year, and that makes me wonder a little bit. You got to get the guy some time. But I am seeing Deshaun Watson finally having his breakout year, and if he does, you've got the best running back in the National Football League on this team that didn't play 90% of the season last year, although he's out the first 4 games. You're the number 1 defense in the National Football League in there, and you bring in Jerry Jeudy to go along with Amari Cooper. I think that's going to help benefit Deshaun Watson tremendously. I think the Browns are going to be the surprise team in the AFC, and I think they beat the Cincinnati Bengals in the championship game.
It sure sounded on Twitter like Amari Cooper would have welcomed a trade out of Cleveland.
Yes, it did. But he's not a complainer. That's as much as you've ever heard him complain. Is that?
And if he thought Deshaun Watson was primed for a big season, he wouldn't be asking out of Cleveland.
Well,
All right.
if he
Well,
if he thought yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay. So, all right. Yeah. Well, Dallas traded him. So, there must have been something there too. Miami. I have Miami, the Chargers, Cleveland, Jacksonville, followed by Cincinnati, Houston, and Pittsburgh. And again, I have Cleveland over Cincinnati. Obviously, it all happens with Watson being healthy and Burrow being healthy, which they weren't last year. We'll let you run, Ryan, by going over the NFC and then getting the rest of your picks. So give us your championship pick in the NFC.
I have the Eagles beating the Packers in the NFC Championship game. Packers should have beat the 49ers in last year's playoffs. If we're talking about a 49ers team that is not as good for whatever reason, roster turmoil, then I think the Packers are, like I said, one of the ascending teams in the NFC, a young roster, good coach. LaFleur and Shanahan go way back. They know each other like brothers. I'm taking the Packers, even though it would be on the road in a playoff upset. I just can't pick another Eagles 49ers NFC Championship game. Can't do it. I'm tired of it. I've seen it. So give me the Eagles over the Packers.
Okay. And then, Mark, you also, go ahead, Ryan, and just give us your Super Bowl pick.
It's got to be the Jets, right? It's got to be, right? No,
No.
it's not. No, it's not. No. I'm going to take Jets fans all the way to the Super Bowl for the first time in whatever it is, 51 years, 55 years, whatever it is. You would know it. What is it, 50, 55 years? I'm going to take you all the way to the Super Bowl, and then I'm going to break your hearts and give you a loss to the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Like I said, I love everything the Eagles have done. I'm a little worried about the internal dysfunction, but you know what they say, winning cures everything, and no one's going to be questioning Sirianni and Hurts' relationship if they're 5-0.
And your playoff sleeper is actually going to be the same as Mark, and that is going to be Indianapolis. They're 75-1. If anybody wants to know, they're 75-1 to win the Super Bowl. That's your playoff sleeper because you didn't pick them as far as your top 7. And your Super Bowl sleeper to win it all is the LA Rams at 30-1.
Yeah, I spoke on the Rams, obviously super high on them. The Colts, like I said, I dumped on the Jaguars a few minutes ago. I think the Colts are the second best team in that division. I would put the Jaguars third. So
wow.
I think the Colts are, very possibly could steal that 7th seed in the AFC because they're playing a third place schedule. I think they're playing a third place schedule. So I like the Colts. Jonathan Taylor back after all what happened with him last year. Anthony Richardson barely played last year, and the Colts were still knocking on the door.
Yeah, remember the Colts and Jags both had late season opportunities to make the playoffs, and they both blew it. Jacksonville blowing it to Tennessee was worse, but the Colts blowing it late in that game against Houston, and that's what propelled Houston to win the division and make the playoffs. Ryan, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. We look forward to talking to you again at some point during the season, but we'll definitely talk to you again when the playoffs start so we can get your take on the upcoming 2024 NFL playoffs, which I hope are not going to be here for quite a long time.
Yeah, by then I'll have regretted my Eagles and Jets picks for sure.
I'm sure we'll forget all of them. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
See you guys.
Great catching up with you, Ryan. I'll make sure I send you a PDF copy of that Playbook Preview Guide magazine. Lots of good stuff you'll like.
Please do. I'm a big fan. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So, Mark, let's close this out and remind everybody that in about 15 minutes, we're going to start right away with our college football picks of the week. So we might actually be a couple minutes late if we don't get through this. So let's round this out. And again, just I've given my AFC. My NFC is San Francisco, Dallas, Detroit, and Tampa. Actually, I'm looking at the wrong one. Let's see. Where is my NFC? Here it is. I have Detroit winning the number 1 seed, followed by the Rams, Tampa Bay, Washington. Those are my division winners. San Francisco, Green Bay, and Seattle are my playoff teams. And in the NFC, I am going to take Detroit over Green Bay. They were the teams that lost to San Francisco last year. They came so close to beating San Francisco last year, and I think they're ready to get over the hump. So I think they'll match up in the championship game with Detroit beating Green Bay, taking on Cleveland. Now, just imagine that, Mark, a Cleveland-Detroit Super Bowl.
A Great Lakes Super Bowl. I like that. Yeah.
I'm not so sure the network will really appreciate that, but a lot of fan bases in Cleveland and Detroit will, that's for sure.
Yeah, two very hungry fan bases for sure.
Yeah, and I'm going to take Cleveland to win it all. And again, this is all about Deshaun Watson staying healthy. But that's my take. Meanwhile, Mark, let's get your take on the NFC pick and also the Super Bowl.
Well, my NFC pick in the championship game, I've got the LA Rams beating Philadelphia. And I think the Rams proved that not only winning the division made them legitimate, so too will it work their way into the playoffs here. Philadelphia, I think, will be the number 1 seed coming out of the NFC East. And they're going to take on the Rams, who I think will be the number 2 seed coming out of that particular division here. Get to the Super Bowl. I would love to have my Cleveland Browns win the Super Bowl, much like you do, but I'm going to hop off the train. I got the Rams over the Browns in the Super Bowl, so it would be the L.A. Rams against the old Cleveland Rams. History.
Okay.
The Rams over the Browns in the Super Bowl.
All right, that would be interesting. You also have Indianapolis as your playoff sleeper, just as Ryan does. So you both have the Colts. And your Super Bowl sleeper, of course, is the same as mine, and that being the Cleveland Browns, since we both have them in the Super Bowl. And that would make sense. Of course, my playoff sleeper is Washington. If I'm going to have them winning the division, just like I did Tampa last year at 100-1, I'm going to roll the dice on Washington this year as my playoff sleeper. And that is going to wrap it up. So, Mark, before we say goodbye to everybody, just want to remind everybody to check this out. This is the Playbook Guide magazine that's available. You can order it at playbooksports.com. You can also check out the Playbook Experts YouTube channel for our weekly show that I produce for you guys, the best and longest tenured Hall of Fame handicappers in the business every Wednesday on Playbook Experts YouTube channel. We record it on Wednesday afternoon, so it's usually available every Wednesday night on Playbook Experts.
Awesome.
All right, Mark. So I'll see you in a few minutes when we take a look at the first week, the first real week of college football, and it's going to be a long season, so we got to start somewhere.
I enjoyed the show, Greg. I look forward to doing our next college football preview show for sure.
Sounds good. And for Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post and Greg DePalma, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff here on the Our Lads Football YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.